If you haven't watched part 1 yet, click on the top right corner or on the link in the pinned comment. The soft glow of candles cast a gentle light over the table, making the world outside disappear. Alexander leaned forward, his voice low and sincere, confessing the feelings he had carried for weeks. Isabella felt her heart leap in her chest. This man, so powerful yet so vulnerable before her, was offering something she had long believed unreachable.
Hello, I'm going to tell you this incredible story. Remember that to receive new stories like this, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notification bell. Let's get to the rest of the story.
Her fingers trembled slightly as she set down her glass, struggling with emotions she had tried so hard to suppress. She smiled softly, but her eyes carried a heavy sadness he couldn't ignore. "I feel it too," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "But I'm scared, Alexander, scared that I might end up hurting you." Her confession hung between them like a fragile thread, shimmering with unspoken fears. Alexander reached out, taking her hand gently in his touch warm and reassuring. "There's no way you could ever hurt me," he said firmly, his gaze searching hers for answers she wasn't ready to give. Yet, somewhere deep inside, she wished he was right. Isabella pulled her hand back gently, blinking away the emotions rising to the surface. "It's too soon," she said, her voice steadier now. "We need time. Let's not rush into something beautiful and ruin it before it begins." Alexander sat back in his chair, disappointment flickering across his face, but he masked it with a gracious nod. He didn't want to scare her away. Not now. Not when he could feel how real this connection was. Instead, he chose a different path, a quieter way to stay close to her heart. He changed the subject with an almost imperceptible shift in tone, asking gently, "Tell me about your mother. I want to help if you'll let me." Isabella hesitated, the weight of her responsibilities heavy on her shoulders. "She has Alzheimer's," she said finally, her voice thick with unshed tears. "But you don't need to worry about that. I don't want you to carry this burden." Her words were wrapped in pride and fear, a wall she instinctively built to protect those she loved, even at her own expense. Alexander listened without interrupting, the pain in her voice carving new places in his heart. "You know," he said, his voice soft but unwavering, "all the fortune I have wouldn't mean a thing if I couldn't use it to help people who need it." He smiled gently, trying to ease the heaviness between them. "I already support an orphanage with over 500 children, and I make sure to visit them every week." His words weren't meant to impress her. They were a window into his soul, one he wanted her to see clearly. A spark of curiosity flickered in Isabella's eyes, mixed with the stubborn hope she tried so hard to suppress. Alexander leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice into a playful whisper, "I'd love for you to come with me sometime. I think you'd love them, and they definitely adore you." For a moment, the walls around Isabella seemed to tremble, just a little. She smiled shyly, feeling something dangerous and beautiful blooming in the spaces between their words. Little did they know that the real test of trust and destiny had only just begun. Tomorrow would open a new door, one that neither of them could have predicted, a door leading straight into the heart of a past that Alexander had never fully revealed, and a future that Isabella was too scared to imagine. As the evening wound down, the warm lights of the restaurant softened into a haze, and the conversation dipped into a tender silence. Isabella shifted nervously in her seat, wrestling with a question that gnawed at her heart. Finally, her voice broke the stillness, hesitant but firm. "I'm sorry for asking, but if we don't end up dating, will my job still be secure?" The moment the words left her lips, she regretted them, but the fear of losing everything she fought for was stronger than her pride. Alexander's smile faltered, replaced by a sadness that made the space between them ache. He leaned back, taking a moment before responding, not wanting to let emotion cloud his answer. "That hurts to hear, Isabella," he said quietly. "But no, our relationship, or the lack of it, will never influence your future here." His voice was full of conviction, of promises he intended to keep. He wanted her to know that her worth had nothing to do with their story, and everything to do with who she was. Trying to ease the tension, Alexander offered a softer smile and added, "Besides, the interviewers already seemed pretty set on you." Honestly, they were impressed, very impressed. Isabella allowed herself a small, genuine smile, the heavy knot in her chest loosening just slightly. But there was still a wall between them, built from her fears and life's hard lessons. Alexander knew he couldn't tear it down tonight. All he could do was keep showing up, brick by brick, until she believed he wouldn't walk away. The next morning, Alexander called Isabella early, his voice light with excitement. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." She hesitated but agreed, curiosity outweighing caution. They met outside the city limits, the air crisp with early morning mist, and he drove her to a sprawling property surrounded by laughter, small hands waving from playgrounds, and murals painted in bright, hopeful colors. Her heart softened immediately, sensing something sacred about the place even before stepping out of the car. As they walked through the orphanage gates, Isabella's eyes widened. There, carved proudly above the entrance, was Alexander's full name. She stopped in her tracks, feeling the gravity of what he had created. "You built this?" she whispered, struggling to believe it. Alexander only nodded, his voice quiet. "I grew up in the streets after losing my parents in an accident. I was eventually taken in by a family who couldn't have kids of their own. They gave me everything, and I swore I would give it back one day." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes as she listened to his story. A real story built not from privilege, but from grit, heartbreak, and endless resilience. The man she thought she knew suddenly became infinitely more layered, infinitely more real. Alexander smiled gently, sensing her walls cracking again, piece by piece. "You see, Isabella," he said, "helping isn't a burden to me. It's my way of living, and it's something I want to share with you, if you'll let me." As they stood there, children laughing and playing around them, something deep inside Isabella shifted. She realized that Alexander wasn't just offering her a job or even a love story. He was offering her a place in a world he had fought like hell to create. A world where miracles were still possible, even for two broken souls learning to trust the impossible. As they left the orphanage, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in strokes of pink and gold. Alexander, still touched by the emotions of the morning, turned to Isabella with a gentle smile. "Is there a place that's special to you?" he asked, hoping to glimpse another corner of her world. Isabella hesitated for a moment, then smiled mischievously. "I'll take you," she said, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and mystery. She asked to drive the Viper herself, and laughing, Alexander handed her the keys without a second thought. The ride took them beyond the city limits, where the paved roads turned into gravel paths and then into wild, untamed trails. They parked at the edge of a thick forest, the sound of crickets filling the air. "We walk from here," Isabella said, already stepping into the tall grass. Alexander followed, brushing branches aside, captivated not just by the journey, but by the way she moved, like someone who belonged to the earth itself. Every step deeper into the woods felt like peeling away layers he hadn't even realized she was hiding. After a short climb, they reached a clearing where the world seemed to stretch out forever. The city lay beneath them, tiny and fragile against the immensity of the landscape. Isabella turned to him, her face illuminated by the last light of day. "This is where I come when I'm lost," she said quietly, "where I remember who I am." Alexander felt his heart tighten. He understood now. This wasn't just a beautiful place. It was her sanctuary, her secret refuge from a world that had demanded too much of her. They stood side by side, the silence between them richer than any conversation. Slowly, instinctively, they turned toward each other, their eyes locking. Alexander reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering longer than necessary. The distance between them disappeared, and as their faces drew closer, the world seemed to fall away. It wasn't just attraction, it was a pull, deep and magnetic, impossible to resist. Their lips brushed lightly, a touch so tentative it felt like a question. But just as the kiss deepened, Isabella pulled away sharply, shaking her head. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't. Not now. I'm sorry, Alexander." Confusion and hurt flashed across his face, but he said nothing, respecting the invisible barrier she had thrown up between them. She turned quickly, beginning to walk back to the car, leaving him standing there with the cold wind wrapping around him like a cruel joke. Back inside the Viper, the tension was thick, suffocating. Alexander couldn't hold back anymore. "What is it, Isabella?" he demanded, his voice low but urgent. "You're hiding something from me. You don't love me? You're scared? Are you married?" He meant it as a half-joke, but the silence that followed stole the humor from the air. Isabella stared ahead, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You're the most incredible man I've ever met. And it's exactly because of that I have to fight against this." Alexander wanted to press her, to demand answers, but something about the sorrow in her voice held him back. They drove the rest of the way in silence, each lost in their own storm of emotions. As he dropped her off at her house, Isabella gave him a faint smile, a smile filled with everything she couldn't say, and disappeared behind her door. Alexander sat there for a moment longer, staring at the empty sidewalk, feeling the distinct, painful certainty that this was only the beginning of the battle for her heart. Days slipped by, each one heavier than the last, filled with the weight of things left unsaid. Isabella buried herself in hope, clinging to the slim chance that her life might still turn around. Then one afternoon, her phone rang, and with it came the news she had been praying for. She had been selected for the position at Carter Enterprises. Overwhelmed with joy, she hugged her mother tightly, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "We made it, Mama. We have a chance now." The next morning, dressed in her new work attire and armed with fragile optimism, Isabella stepped into the towering glass building that would mark the beginning of a new chapter. Her heart pounded with nerves as she entered the elevator. As the doors began to close, a familiar figure slid in, tall, commanding, unforgettable. It was Alexander. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that brief moment, the world tilted again. They exchanged the most formal of greetings, as if they were nothing more than strangers. The air between them crackled with everything they didn't say. Alexander, looking straight ahead, broke the silence first. "Congratulations on the job, Isabella. You deserve it." His voice was calm, almost distant, but there was an ache buried deep inside it. Before the doors opened, he added softly, "And I'm still rooting for your mother. Please, let me help." Isabella smiled sadly, her throat tightening. "Thank you, Alexander," she replied. "But with this job, you've already saved her, at least for now." The words hung in the small elevator, heavy and bittersweet. As she stepped out onto her floor, she didn't dare look back. She knew if she did, the floodgates might break open. Sometimes survival meant keeping a polite distance, even from the people who made you feel alive. The days at Carter Enterprises passed in a blur. Isabella threw herself into her work with the same fierce determination that had carried her through every battle life had thrown at her. She wasn't just good, she was exceptional. Directors took notice. Colleagues whispered her name with admiration, and even the most jaded executives found themselves impressed by her grit and grace. She had earned her place not by chance, but by sheer, unrelenting will. Alexander watched from afar, his heart swelling with a pride he tried desperately to keep hidden. There were moments he would catch glimpses of her, head down, focused, determined, and he would smile to himself, knowing that no one else saw the fire she carried inside. And yet, each passing day, without a real conversation between them, felt like a slow bleed. He had given her space because she asked for it, but every fiber of him wanted to close that distance. Little did they know, fate was already weaving the next twist in their story. A twist that would leave no more room for polite distance, no more excuses, and no more hiding from the truth that bound them tighter than either dared to admit. 2 months into her new role, Isabella had become the undeniable star of the department. Her work ethic was unmatched, her results astonishing, and her quiet determination impossible to overlook. She carried herself with a grace that inspired respect and admiration, hiding behind her tireless dedication to battles she fought alone. But no mask is perfect. One afternoon, as she crossed the corridor with a stack of reports in hand, her body gave way, and she collapsed, the world spinning into darkness. By a twist of fate, or perhaps something greater, Alexander was right there when it happened. Without hesitation, he caught her in his arms, his heart lurching at the sight of her fragile, unconscious form. Panic surged through him, but he masked it under a calm exterior as he carried her swiftly toward the medical office. "It's probably just exhaustion," Isabella murmured weakly when she regained a sliver of consciousness, trying to brush off the incident with a tired smile. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Alexander couldn't shake the fear gripping his chest. That night, unable to find peace, he summoned Isabella to his office. As soon as she stepped in, the words tumbled out of him, raw, unfiltered, desperate. "You think it's easy for me to see you every day, smell your perfume, and pretend I don't feel anything?" he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I sleep thinking about you. I wake up thinking about you. I'm running out of patience, Isabella." Red-cheeked, Isabella lowered her gaze, her defenses crumbling. "And you think it's different for me?" she whispered. "Do you know how many times I almost called you? How many times I stood outside your door, ready to give up and tell you everything?" The confession cracked the last of the walls between them. There were no more reasons to wait, no more battles to fight against the inevitable. That night, Alexander invited her to his home, determined that if fate had given them this second chance, he wouldn't waste it. The evening unfolded softly, full of glances that spoke louder than words and touches that mended old fears. Over dinner, they rediscovered each other, not just as boss and employee, not just as two people dancing around an invisible line, but as two souls who had finally found something rare and real. When Alexander kissed her that night, it wasn't rushed or hesitant. It was a promise, a sealing of everything left unspoken for too long. Later, wrapped in the quiet intimacy of his home, they surrendered completely to the love neither could deny anymore. It wasn't about perfection or fairy tales. It was about survival, about clinging to something real in a world that had been far too cruel to both of them. In each other, they found peace, and in that peace, they found courage. The courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't something destined only for other people. But as dawn approached, fate prepared its cruelest test yet. One that would require a different kind of strength, a different kind of love, and a faith deeper than either had ever dared to imagine. Alexander woke up to an empty side of the bed, panic instantly gripping his chest. He called out for Isabella, heart pounding, until he found her in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with a soft smile. Relief washed over him, until she staggered suddenly, her knees giving way, and collapsed once again into his arms. Without wasting a second, Alexander rushed her to the hospital, fear gnawing at him like a living thing. It was there, in a sterile white room, that he learned the truth. Isabella was fighting an aggressive cancer, and had been for some time. Rage, heartbreak, and helplessness crashed over him in violent waves. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered to her fragile form as she lay unconscious. But when she finally opened her eyes, looking at him with that same gentle, unbreakable spirit, all his anger dissolved. She didn't need scolding. She needed love and strength and someone who wouldn't run away. Alexander vowed right then that he would fight with her and for her until there was nothing left to give. Mobilizing his fortune and influence, Alexander gathered the best oncologists in the world. He arranged for Isabella's mother to be cared for with full medical support at home, setting up a private UTI and a rotation of nurses. Meanwhile, he secured a treatment program under a world-renowned cancer specialist, doing everything humanly possible to save her. But after weeks of painful treatments and sleepless nights, The doctor's verdicts grew darker. "There's little hope," they said. "Prepare yourselves." Desperation drove Alexander to the one place he hadn't turned yet, a small, quiet church. Alone, with no fortune to shield him, no power to command miracles, he fell to his knees and prayed like a man drowning. "God," he cried out, "all the money I have is worthless if I can't save her. Please, just this one miracle. Not for me, for her." The rawness of his prayer shook him to the core. And as he left the church, a strange peace settled over him, accompanied by a whisper deep inside his soul. "You are her cure. I put you in her path so that your love would heal her." Racing back to the hospital, hope surging through him, Alexander demanded another round of tests. But before the doctors could act, Isabella's monitors began to shriek. Her heart had stopped. Staff rushed in as Alexander was dragged out of the room, helpless to do anything but wait. Minutes stretched into an eternity, until suddenly, unbelievably, she was back, gasping for air, alive again. Everyone around stared in shock, unable to explain what had just happened. When she opened her eyes, weak but smiling, she called for Alexander. He rushed to her side, tears flooding his vision as he clutched her hand. "While I was gone," she whispered, "I saw a man dressed in shining white robes. He touched my chest and pulled something dark out of me. He said, 'Not yet, daughter. Go back.'" Alexander sobbed openly, overwhelmed with gratitude and awe. "You came back to me," he said, kissing her forehead. "I'll never let you go again." And there, in that hospital room filled with disbelief and wonder, Isabella and Alexander realized that their story had never been just about chance. It had always been about destiny. Now tell me, do you believe that true love can survive even death itself? Have you ever felt that someone was placed in your path not by chance, but by destiny? Rocket, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone who's holding on to hope right now. And if this emotional journey touched your heart, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next real story we have for you. Because sometimes the most incredible stories are still being written, and yours might be the next one.